Welcome to Provision Devices at Scale. My name is Pamela Cortez, and I am on the Azure IoT product team, focusing on hardware ecosystem engagements and training. So I'm really happy that you're viewing this video today and getting this hands-on training. So for this session, it's all about provisioning devices at scale. We'll have a hands-on lab for you to do after this session. And if you ever want to reach out to me, you could find me on Alta Ohms on Twitter and GitHub. And then on LinkedIn, I always like to hear from you and get feedback as well. So now this whole event is actually part of Build an End-to-End Solutions series, where we talk everywhere from transforming your business with IoT to connecting devices to the cloud. Today, we're going to focus on the provisioning devices at scale, but soon we also have other sessions as well, including understanding IoT message processing, analytics and business integration, how to build the intelligent edge, and then build IoT solutions with IoT Central. So you can see, you get a little bit about everything across our different products and services to really help you understand how to get started. And then each one of these are linked to a hands-on lab. So after you're done viewing this video and learning the ins and outs on how to get started, you can go and do this for yourself as well. All right, so for this session on the agenda today, we're going to go over the device lifecycle and device provisioning service. I'll talk about the different scenarios on why you would want to use device provisioning service versus Azure IoT Hub. We'll talk about how it works, and then it's all about going through this lab work walkthrough. So I'll teach you how to provision your IoT devices securely at scale with device provisioning service. So I'm going to create a resource group, show you how to do a group enrollment, what is a group enrollment, how you provision your device with X509 certificates, and then how you can send that device telemetry to IoT Hub, and then how to deprovision that device. So really go through that device life cycle, which you'll learn about in just a moment. And then at the end, I will show you how to get your hands on this lab and go ahead and a list of developer resources. If you're taking the AZ220, I'm going to really cover some really great resources and information for you. So this is a great training webinar for you if you're really trying to get upskilled and ready for that certification. All right. So we're going to take a look at the IoT solution architecture. Now, I already gone through building an IoT solution architecture in a past session. So this, I really wanted to highlight where we talk, what are we talking about today, and also some things to think about. So for an IoT solution architecture, you have things, insights, and actions. So for things, we have all of these different ways to connect an IoT device or gateway to IoT Hub. But there's also a service called Device Provisioning Service that is a helper service to help you register and connect large sets of data. And so we really recommend using this helper service. It really helps you assign and register those devices to specific Azure IoT Hub endpoints at scale. So I am going to have the assumption that you know about IoT Hub since the last session is covered IoT Hub. If you don't understand what IoT Hub is, do recommend you watching that session. I will give you a high level in this session though as well. And then the rest of building an IoT solution, which will be covered in another session, is deriving insights, storing that data, analyzing that data, and viewing that data to derive insights and really identify those patterns. That way you can automate rules and alerts. And then action is all about, connecting it to your business integration, setting up those rules and alerts, and then being able to do something with all of the insights that you've gathered from these things. Now, Microsoft offers a very comprehensive IoT product platform. Today, we're going to cover the IoT device provisioning service, but you can see there's all of these other services and products as when you're building an end-to-end IoT solution. Now, when we think of device provisioning service, before I talked about how you have two ways that you could build an IoT solution. One is that you can use Azure IoT Central, a managed app service, for you to go ahead and connect devices at scale. Well, Azure IoT Central actually leverages device provisioning service in the backend. So this is great. So you still get the support for device provisioning service if you decide to go that route of working and building a solution with Azure IoT Central. If you're more in using our platform as a service because you are trying to build more of a customized IoT solution where you want full control of pricing and everything else and the products and services you use, and you're taking that route, you can use device provisioning service when building from the ground up with our platform as a service offerings. Before I get into device provisioning service, let's talk a little bit about Azure IoT Hub. Now, to connect all of these devices, we need to be able to connect it to the cloud through a cloud gateway, and that's where Azure IoT Hub comes in. It does that bi-directional communication. You can have millions and billions of devices connected through Azure IoT Hub. We have open source SDKs. So most likely we have an SDK in a language that you prefer. So if you like coding in Python or C, maybe you have a microcontroller or a small footprint device. We have an embedded C SDK. We have support for Java, C#. So a lot of languages you probably are already using, we have support for, and they're open source, which is great. You can just get up and running, sending messages to the cloud quickly. We also have support through different types of protocols, even MQTT, AMQP, and HTTPS. And you're able to send telemetry, receive commands, and we have support for device management. Also, you have the ability to scale. There's billions of messages you can send. You can scale up and down, meaning that if you're building a proof of concept and you need to then take it into production, which has thousands of devices, you don't have to reinvent the wheel with your proof of concept. You can easily scale up or down, and we have pricing SKUs that allow you to do that as well. You can also send message routes to different things. You also are able to send your message routes to storage or other downstream services. You could do file upload. So there's a lot of things you can do when it comes to scale and integration. And then what I would consider most importantly is end-to-end security. What's nice is that you could do pre-device certificates. We have that X509 support as well as SaaS tokens, whatever your solution needs when it comes to security there. We do have different types of support. We also have support for enabling and disabling devices. You can also do firmware and software updates. And then we have Azure Defender support. So if you're building an end-to-end solution, what's nice about Azure IoT Hub is that you can leverage Azure Defender to be able to look at vulnerabilities across your full solution. Now let's talk about device provisioning service. Device provisioning service really allows you to do that automated provisioning, zero-touch provisioning at scale. You can centralize your provisioning workflow. So if you're doing one device or groups of devices, you're able to provision at scale and have a nice way of doing that in a centralized view. You can load balance across multiple IoT hubs, which we'll talk about in a moment. And then you can re-provision. And there's some scenarios where that makes sense where you need to re-provision devices. It supports TPM and X509 certs as well. Let's talk about really the biggest challenges when it comes to devices. First is developing and maintaining a connected, secure, serviceable, and supported device. This can be really challenging with different types of devices. And the way that we have support there is through our open source SDKs. As I mentioned earlier, we have support across the top programming languages for you. The next thing is that we see as challenges is actually integrating these devices and their data to cloud services. So as I mentioned before, IoT Hub is our cloud gateway, so you're able to do that at scale. The next thing is out-of-box provisioning the devices at scale. This is all about registering and provisioning those devices or configuring those devices, and that's where device provisioning service comes in and helps you. Let's talk a little bit about device management lifecycle before we jump into device provisioning service. Now, there's really 5 stages when we think of device management. The first stage is you're really going to plan. This is all about what are the devices you're using? How do you want to group those devices? More importantly, who has access to those devices in your organization? You might want one group, one team to have control of one set of product versus another team have a set of control of other set of product, or just give it to your certain admin or whoever's managing the devices. You want to be able to understand who's controlling what, which device, and give them access. After plan, you're going to provision. Provision is all about securely authenticating devices on board for management and provision for service. The next part is configuring. This is all about providing updates, configuration, and applications to assign the purpose of each device. Next stage is monitoring. You really need to understand what's happening with those devices, the health of that device, the inventory. You need to be able to understand and monitor the security, why being able to be proactive about any issues that might come to play. The next thing is retirement. So there's a lot of reasons why you might want to retire through this life cycle. You might want to replace. Maybe your team has a new IoT device or provision, or maybe a device that's going end of life, and you want to go ahead and add a new device to your inventory. You can do that or replace it. You could decommission devices if maybe it had failure, or upgrade, as I mentioned before, if other device was end of life. So needing to be able to do and have retirement as part of your life cycle is important. And you notice this is a life cycle. It's a continuous life cycle. You're not just done with planning and then you just move on. It is a cycle that you continue with. So let's talk about the provisioning part of that cycle, because I talked about a little bit about provisioning and configuration, and this is where DPS can really help you, which is device provisioning service. So what we've noticed is with provisioning, it can be quite challenging, and there's a couple reasons for that. One is that you might need a solution, might need each device to be able to be taken offline quickly, and it needs to be per device versus a group of devices. Lots of times provisioning is a manual process, so you have a developer who's updating the firmware or provisioning one device at a time, provisioning the next device, and it can start to be a very tedious but also very manual process that could take a really long time, especially if you have thousands of devices. Initial configuration can become irrelevant between manufacturing and deployment. So you can imagine if you have products just sitting in inventory for a really long time, and then it's time where now it's being sent off to a customer, you might have updates that have already happened to those devices before it even gets to the customer that you wanted to get to, or needs to go to a different data center or a different IoT hub. To sit there and go back can be kind of a pain. And so that's one of the challenges. Another challenge is device supply chains are complex. This could be anywhere from you have acquisition of your company and the products need to be transferred to ownership. So there's a lot of reasons why provisioning is actually quite hard today. And this is where device provisioning uh, really, really helps in those different scenarios. And so I'm going to give an overview. So you might see the word DPS, that's just the short version of device provisioning service. So I'll use those interchangeably, but really overview is cross-region and is cross-subscription, which is really, really nice to have that ability to be having a global service. If you need to switch IoT hubs or be in a different region, being able to do that is really nice to have that already ready for you. And it has multi-tenancy solutions support as well. Automatic reprovision supports through the life cycle. So if you need to do factory reset or migration, as we talked about earlier, you're also able to do flexible target device assignment logic. This is all about being able to do, maybe load balancing of your hub, static assignment when you know the hub, evenly weighted for round robin assignment, maybe the lowest latency. If your device is traveling overseas and you want it to be updated to a different data center or a different IoT hub, you could do that as well. So having that ability for you to assign the device assignment logic is really useful. You're also able to manage devices as a group or individual. So this is based on the authentication type. So if you just want to do it individually, you can, and you can also set up a group enrollment. There's multiple authentication methods that are supported. So if you want to do SAS tokens, symmetric keys for getting started, that's great, especially if you're building a POC, or there's a couple scenarios that you'll actually want to use SAS tokens. You'll also have support for TPM endorsement keys for secure storage, and then for X509 certs. We also have support through the open source SDKs. So those open source SDKs I was talking about for IoT Hub, it also has support for device provisioning service too. So you can definitely leverage those when if you're coding on a device or updating the firmware on the device, we have open source SDKs for you to help you manage the support for DPS. And it has IoT Edge device support. So if you're using the IoT Edge runtime, you can use the device provisioning service. So it's great for any gateway devices that you're running the runtime on. And IoT Edge runtime is perfect for those who want solutions where you want to take those intelligent workloads and put it on the edge device and run it all there locally. Let's dig into the selection of different types of scenarios. So, there's a lot of different scenarios where device provisioning service can really help you, but I'm going to cover 5 of them right now that tend to be the most popular reasons why you should be using device provisioning service. Now, the first one is really just the bootstrapping of devices to IoT Hub in a single IoT solution. So this is definitely a scenario that device provisioning service can be used for, especially if you're trying to onboard, thousands of devices. It's great to use that device provisioning service. The next scenario is really load balancing. Now, load balancing is one of the most simplest multi-hub scenarios to think of. Devices are allocated to different hubs to make the management easier. The next scenario is ownership based multi-tenancy solutions. So let's say you sell your widget to multiple customers that you want to have data isolation. You might want to look into device provisioning service, especially if you want to make sure that these devices are connected to a hub for a customer who purchased them. So you're able to do that management a lot easier. The next thing is really the location base. If you want a device to connect to an IoT solution that is, in the region, the data centers in the region, or the device is in a region that you want to have it close to the closest IoT hub with the lowest latency. So that's a really popular scenario. As I mentioned before, that's For example, if you have a product that's overseas in India that's being shipped to, let's say, the US, you might want to change where your data is being sent to for the data center, or you might want to just go ahead and pick the certain data center if your solution, you need all of your data for government or regulation reasons, need it all in one area. The next is reprovisioning. So reprovisioning, I really believe it's one of the most important scenarios. It really is the one that happens later in the device lifecycle. Provisioning could occur before or because the device was sold to another user. For example, in case of a lease, the device might have moved because of vehicle and now needs to be reconnected to a different region, or it gets back to the security aspect. Maybe the device is installed in a sensitive location and the policy dictates what device needs to be reattested or redeclared its identity every 90 days or 30 or even daily. So there's a lot of reasons why reprovisioning could be really useful in your particular scenario. So I keep using the word provisioning, but what does that actually mean? So before I even get even more to device provisioning service, let's actually talk about what that provisioning word actually means. So in general, provisioning devices is actually a two-part process. The first process is called a provisioning setup, which really requires a human operator to pre-register the device in the IoT solution, so the IoT solution knows that the device exists. Additionally, that human operator can also add some additional configuration for the devices. The human operator will also need to program the device to its target IoT solution. The second part is when the device turns on. So a great example of this is I get my device, I connect it to Wi-Fi, and now it's already ready to establish a connection to an IoT solution, where the device needs to prove it is indeed the device that the human operator has registered previously. So once the device is authenticated, it can go through some runtime assignments as well to gather up some more setup process. So only when both of these steps are complete, then the device can be really considered provisioned. So it's got to have both of those steps. One of the callouts I do want to make a mention of on that manufacturing step, really what I was talking about, that human operator, this step really happens in the manufacturing line. These roles in the step normally includes, the silicone manufacturer, the integrator, or the end manufacturer of the device. This is not a new step in the manufacturing process. Rather, it actually ties to existing steps that installs the initial software and ideally the HSM on the device. Instead of creating a device ID in the step, the device is programmed with the provisioning service information, enabling it to call the provisioning service when it gets its connection in full and IoT solution assignment when it's switched on. So I do want to call that out. It isn't, a brand new step that you really have to do in the manufacturing. When the device is getting ready, you're actually just adding it to a process you're already having if you are the device builder. All right, let's dig into provisioning challenges. Now, this is before we even use device provisioning service. And this will actually probably help all of you understand why, even more on top of the scenarios, why device provisioning is there in the first place. So when you think of provisioning challenges, here's a really simple one to think of. One is, for this particular example, imagine if you want to connect a device to an IoT hub. It's really simple. You have a device, you have one connection string, and that device is connected to that one IoT hub. What happens if you have multiple devices that you want to assign an IoT solution? You would actually need to assign each one of these individual devices to this same IoT hub connection string. Again, this is a relatively easy thing to do when you have one hub, as you can add this information to any device at the time of manufacturing. Expanding a little bit more, what if you want to add a new IoT device to a new IoT hub? Now it's getting a little bit harder because you have to keep track of multiple IoT hubs. So you can see on my screen right now that you have two IoT hubs, and now you have a different connection string that you're trying to connect that one device to, or one device to one IoT hub and on one device to another IoT hub. You can see it's getting harder to keep track of these multiple devices and IoT hubs and which ones are assigned to what. So now you can see now I have two connection strings connected to different devices. And then I have that third device and a new IoT hub, and they all have their own individual connection string to different IoT hubs. Continuing on to this example, what happens if you want to assign an existing device to an IoT hub? And this is really difficult because a human operator would have to program this device because each IoT hub has a unique endpoint. This last example is not always feasible because the IoT devices may already be deployed and installed, and to reconfigure it is very difficult. So you could see that if I wanted to switch IoT hubs or put all of these devices back into one IoT hub, it could be very, very tedious. You have to go back to the device itself to do the manual input and change the connection string. And this process can be very tedious. And so an individual device assignment may need to change once the device has been successfully provisioned. So it adds that extra layer of challenge when you start adding more IoT hubs or having a need for more devices that need to switch between hubs. So you can see this starts to get really complicated really quickly. And having a script is one thing, but trying to automate this process when you have many different hubs and devices becomes quite difficult. And this is where IoT Hub device provisioning service comes to play. To migrate some of those challenges mentioned, IoT Hub device provisioning service can simplify the provisioning setup and also allows for late assignment for IoT devices to IoT hubs after the device is connected. So let me go ahead and go in and show you how this actually works. All right, so for provisioning for IoT Hub device provisioning service, we're going to show, an IoT hub here, but the process can actually work across, 10 hubs linked to a single device provisioning service. But for this example, we're really just going to use one hub. So after the device is manufactured, the device enrollment information is added to device provisioning service. This is the only manual step in the process that is part of the provisioning setup. At some point afterwards, it could be maybe a day, it could be several months, the device is eventually going to go online and it's going to connect to device provisioning service and find its IoT solution home. So you can see the device is going, where do I go? It's pinging up to the cloud to device provisioning service. So what will happen is device provisioning service and the device will go through an authentication handshake using the device identity info. DPS verifies the device it identifies the device identity, and you can see that it does that through whatever authentication type that you're using. After that happens, device provisioning service will register that device to IoT Hub, and it populates the initial desired device state. And now you can see that IoT Hub returns the connection info for the device. And then device provisioning service gives the device to its IoT Hub connection info. Now the device can establish a connection with IoT Hub. And it receives its initial configuration from the IoT Hub, and it can make any changes and updates as needed. Now the device can start sending telemetry to your IoT hub, which then you can use that device telemetry and the data that's coming in. You can put that as part of your business logic to gather insights, which then you can use those insights and bring it back to the device. So you can see that's how device provisioning service works with IoT Hub and on the device side. Let's talk a little bit about re-provisioning at scale. So millions of devices can connect to a global endpoint of Azure IoT Hub device provisioning service and can be assigned to the correct IoT Hub. But if devices need to change to another IoT hub, an example of this would be when a device is sold to another user, or now devices need to connect to another region, IoT Hub device provisioning service can do all of this with one simple IoT Hub assignment change. And it allows the device to send out any provisioning request to fetch the new IoT Hub information. So you can see the device is doing the sending the provisioning request. And now I can go to IoT Hub and I can change the device assignments to the IoT Hub West US from East. And now when the devices do a request, it will go and change to IoT Hub West. So it makes re-provisioning really easy to do and gets you up and running pretty quickly to a different hub. All right, so let's talk about IoT Hub and device provisioning service support. So I included here our different kind of SKUs. And so what I wanted to showcase here is that we have a basic SKU and we have a standard free SKU. DPS is supported on both basic and standard. The differences really between basic and standard is the fact that basic allows you to do that device to cloud telemetry, and then standard lets you do everything, including cloud to device messaging. So really that bi-directional communication instead of just sending telemetry up to the cloud. It also gives you that IoT Edge support. One of the other things I want to call out is that device provisioning service is free to use with IoT Hub, but there is a price for having device provisioning service, which is about 12 cents per 1,000 operations. And so one thing I'll call out here is I always get the question of what is an operation? Things that are operations, you can think of it as, every time you register a device, service size changes, as in adding enrollment, updating enrollment list, or get query operations. And then every 6 months, an activity is given an enrollment entry will occur a keep alive operation. So you can see that it's a very minuscule price that's added that you can choose to add to your solution. Let's talk about support with developer tooling or setting up your development environment. So we have support across many different ways to set up device provisioning service. You can use our Azure IoT Explorer for support for your IoT devices, especially when seeing for IoT Hub. But if you're using our example code or anything like that, we do have amazing extensions for VS Code, for Visual Studio. And if you prefer to do everything through a command line or part of your solution building on a command line, we do have an Azure IoT CLI extension, which is really nice to use. It has device provisioning support. I do want to do a call out. If you're not using Visual Studio or VS Code, perfectly fine. When you're using our vendor tooling, we do have libraries and support in different areas. So for example, if you're using a PIC IoT board or any microchip, MCU or MPU, and you're using MP Lab, we have some great examples with using Azure RTOS with device provisioning service and our SDKs through MP Lab and through some other vendor toolings as well. So you get this sample code that you can use and some additional tooling support depending on what you're using with Azure IoT. All right, now let's go ahead and jump into the demo. So we're going to, as a reminder, we're going to create an IoT hub. We're going to deep dive into device provisioning service. I'm going to give a lot of tips along the way. We're going to talk about group enrollments and then work with X509 certificates. Then we're going to send telemetry up to IoT Hub to make sure everything's working. We'll dig into the device twin and make sure that not only do we have device to cloud messaging working, but that we have cloud to device working as well. And then we'll deep dive into provisioning. All right, so go ahead and get into the Azure portal. As I mentioned before, we have all of these different tooling options. So there's many different ways to actually create an IoT hub. And so we won't deep dive into every single one of those options today, since we only need to create one IoT hub. So we're going to do that through the portal. So make sure you have your Azure subscription ready and handy. So I have one already. If you're going through tutorials on Microsoft Learn, which we'll go to that site at the end of the workshop, they are sandbox environments. So you will get an Azure subscription in the sandbox environment, so you don't need one. However, if you want to get an Azure subscription, we do have great offerings, and you can do this with the free tier as well if you're just wanting to get started. And I always like to mention to people, if you set up and you have a subscription, you're all good to go, and it doesn't actually show up where you have subscription, make sure that your subscription is selected as a global subscription, because if you don't see it, most likely it's because it didn't automatically default as a global subscription. So just double check that, and that way you know you have it nice and ready. All right, so let's go ahead and create an IoT hub. So I've created a couple already, but I'm just going to go through this process just so you can see how to create an IoT hub. And you can do this a couple different ways. You can go through the marketplace. I just went straight to actually just my home page, but let me go ahead and show you the other ways you can do this as well. So you can create a new resource. And then under Internet of Things, you actually will see IoT Hub, and then you will see the IoT Hub device provisioning service. So you're going to want to create both of these because your device provisioning service will link to an IoT hub that you have set up. So I'm just going to create an IoT hub again. I'm going to use existing resource group. And I'm going to go ahead and assign a region. I'm just going to assign West to represent Redmond and go ahead and name an IoT hub. So I'm just going to say workshop part 3, and that is available. We're going to go to size. Again, you can choose the different tiers. IoT Hub is supported in all of these different tiers. So the free tier, you could do this getting started with DPS with the free tier if you want. I'm just choosing standard tier, mostly because I'm not paying the bill, but it's very up to you which tier makes sense for your application. So I'm going to go ahead, review and create. You can see that I have the different I have West as my region. I have it part of my resource group that is dedicated to this workshop. Have my subscription all going and some more information. I go ahead and create it. So while that's working, that magic and deployment is underway, let's go ahead and go back to creating a resource. Go back to Internet of Things, and we're going to create a device provisioning service. And you're going to see it is just as easy to create an IoT hub as it is as easy as it was to create that IoT hub. The same with the device provisioning service. So let's go ahead and just have workshop DPS. Oh, I'm going to choose that same resource group, same location, going ahead and creating. So why those create? I always recommend people to check out the products available by region, because you're going to notice that DPS is not supported in every single region that IoT Hub is supported in. So it's just good to see when it's coming along. So for example, in Central India, we do have time that we are going to make that live and expect it. So this is just a really great way to see where our products are available by the different regions. All right, let's go here. Now, earlier I created a DPS, but I just wanted to showcase how easy it was to create one. So let's go ahead. Go to DPS, my workshop DPS. So I have a dummy account here, all set up. So here, let's dig into the different parts of the device provisioning service and how to get that connected to the IoT hub that you just created. So first, we're going to take a look around. So well, the first place I'm going to go is the manage allocation policy. This is what we talked about earlier on. You could have different ways, policy assignments, devices, the way that they're linked to your IoT hub. So you can have evenly weighted. Evenly weighted really is all about evenly, it's evenly shares the devices across the linked IoT hub. So if you're provisioning devices to only one IoT hub, we recommend this setting. It's a default setting. And then we also have the lowest latency. Again, it is all about those assigned devices to that link IoT hub will result in the lowest latency communication between device and IoT hub. And then static configuration is all about this policy requires a desired IoT hub to be listed in the enrollment entry for that particular device to be provisioned. Let's just keep with default, and we recommend this one for most scenarios. Next part that you're going to want to do is actually link your IoT hub that you created. So I created an IoT hub earlier. You can see that my IoT hubs are the ones I just created are still in deployment, and to be, to go quicker on showcasing this in the workshop, the lab, I just created an IoT hub earlier. Normally it doesn't take very long, but just for time, I already pre-created it. So a way that you can link your IoT hub. All you're going to do is hit add, and is as easy as choosing which IoT hub that you want linked to device provisioning service. As a reminder, you can have up to 10 linked IoT hubs, and so it's always good to know how many that you can have support it. So we already have one here ready to go. You can see that everything's good. This is West US. I had the tiers S1 and what the name is and the connection string for that particular IoT hub. And if you're ever forgetting the steps for creating for linking or just getting started with device provisioning service, I always recommend to check out the quick start because it'll sit there and go step by step, and it's a pretty straightforward process, but there's little steps along the way, so it's always good to have this right here in the portal. We do have documentations and on the Azure site and tutorials, but it's good to see this right in the portal. So we did the second step, which is link your device provisioning service and IoT hub. That way, the device provisioning service can go ahead and register those devices into that hub. We also set up an allocation policy already, and we did evenly weight it on the different IoT hubs. Really, we only have one IoT hub assigned and linked, so it really doesn't make that big of a deal, but it's default. And then it goes through other steps too and gives you guidance like how do you set up your device during the manufacturing process, which we'll go through together, how to add a device unique security artifacts to the DPS, pretty much how to enroll a device and manage your enrollments. We're not going to click on that because we are actually going to go through that right now. So there's no reason for us to click on that tutorial, but if you're in the portal and want to know how to do that, you can right there. And then tutorials on how to start and verify your device, which we're going to do again today. All right, so let's go ahead and look at our enrollments, which is the next step. So you have the option of individual enrollment, or you have an option of group enrollment. And today we are going to focus on group enrollment. And you can see we already have a group enrollment for this workshop, but I'm going to go ahead and show how to create a group enrollment. So this is pretty straightforward, but we're going to go through different elements of this, and that way you understand some options that you have on your side. So you can easily create a name. So for this one, let's go ahead and say workshop demo DPS, and you can choose if you want to use X509 certs or symmetric key. Again, if you want to get started quickly and really see how to work with device provisioning service, you can go with the symmetric key, but just really consider the pros and cons if you're going to be using that in in your actual production. So definitely we recommend using certificates. So for this example, we're going to click certificate. You also have support where you can sit there and say, is this device that's going into this group enrollment, is it going to be an IoT Edge device? And what that means is that this device is using the IoT Edge runtime. And so that none of our devices today is using the IoT Edge runtime. So we're just going to keep that as false. If you switched it to true, there's more information you can share there, but we're just going to keep it as false for this moment. And then you're going to say your certificate type. So for this example, we are going to be using a CA certificate. This one's already made for us. I created one earlier, and so this one is just makes life easier that it's already there and available. If you are interested in playing around with CA certificate and want to get started with that, we do have a a sample, a helper script that you can check out. And so that one, I do recommend if you are looking at that to keep in mind that these are just helper scripts. Do not use this in production. And there's a couple different reasons for that, and we can jump into it, but for right now, just keep in mind that if you're going to just use a helper script to come up with a CA certificate, that we do have a nice helper script for you, but I would not recommend that in production. And while we're talking about this, let's go ahead and just talk about X509 certificate in general. And so this is a really, I'm going to give a really high level overview of the certificate type. But keep in mind, we have tons of resources on this on docs that you can view to get more insights on this, because this can get really complicated really quickly. So for the certificate type, high level, when we're thinking about security and high level certificates, we have a concept of public and private key encryption. So a public key enables data to be encrypted. The use of this key distorts text of the message. So let's say you have a message and now it's encrypted. You have no idea what that message says now. And so the private key is used to decrypt this message back into its original text. The public key cannot be used to decrypt this message. So really high level, what public and private key encryption. For those private keys, you need to keep that secret. And to keep that secret, the public key infrastructure is needed to prevent these keys from becoming lost or stolen. This infrastructure is potentially a disadvantage for public and private key systems. However, the X509 certificates with the Azure Device Provisioning Service, the public key infrastructure is actually built into this service. We or you, just user in general who's using DPS, we won't even know what and we don't need to know, we don't know or own our private keys. The private keys are generated by helper tools that are publicly available. The keys are stored in the X509 certificates, and the user we don't really need to do much more than upload those to Azure DPS. And the password protects the content of the private key. And so I know that's super high level, but just keep in mind that that public key infrastructure is built into device provisioning service. So for this example, you're going to want to upload your certificate that you have. So I've actually have a certificate, a CA certificate already ready to go. So went ahead and created it. You can select it. And again, I created it by using this helper script. So you select your primary certificate, you say how you want to assign the devices to the hub, and then you need to make sure you actually have the IoT hub that this is linked to. And so if you don't see anything here, you need to make sure that you're linking to your IoT hub that you want DPS to work with. We did it earlier when we were in the device provisioning service, and when in the section in the blade that says link your IoT hub. So we've already done this. And then there's a second other part of this is you can select how you want device data to be handled and re-provisioning. So there's actually a couple options when it comes to re-provisioning that you can look into. And there's actually a couple reasons why you might even think about re-provisioning. So kind of what I talked about before, if devices would say move to different locations, network latency is approved by having the device migrated to a closer IoT hub. Another one would be multi-tenancy. Another scenario with provisioning would be a solution change, or maybe even if it's quarantine. Example of that would be if a device is it's the device that you manufactured, maybe is something happened to it, maybe it was compromised, maybe it's out of date. That's a solution where you can sit there and update, get it back to compliance, and once that device is functioning properly, then it can be migrated back to its main IoT hub. So that's another type of scenario. So you can see you actually have 3 different options here that you can choose if you ever need a re-provision. The first one, really, that's your default, the re-provision and migrate data. This one's pretty straightforward, and it's default for each one of those. The next one, re-provisioning, re-provision and reset to initial config. This one actually makes sense if you're looking to do a factory reset without changing any of the IoT hubs. So that's when you actually want to use that one. And then the never re-provision. This one means that the device is actually never going to be reassigned to a different hub. This policy really only makes sense when it's provided for managing backwards compatibility. So I would recommend sticking to the first default option, unless for some reason, which is a common scenario, you want to do a factory reset without changing the IoT hubs, and then consider that one. All right, so after you have selected all of those, you can go ahead and save. And then what's going to happen after you save? It will create that enrollment group. So I already have an enrollment group. I went through the exact same stages, but the difference is I actually uploaded my certificates. And when you want to upload your certificates, you can actually do that by clicking on certificates. Let's see. Refresh. So we're just going to refresh the page. But when you want to add your certificates, you can go to that certificate section, part of the blade, and go ahead and upload. One thing to keep in mind, though, when you are uploading your root certificate, you need to make sure that the certificate, before it can even be used to authenticate devices to DPS, you actually need to establish proof of possession of that certificate. So I'm just going to go back home, go back to DPS. And this is probably on my side when it comes to connection, network connection. Hang with me for a bit. And while we're doing this, while I'm trying to get my network back up, what we can do is actually go to the next part, which is going ahead and jumping into the code. So we're going to want to actually create code that has a simulated device and that this device is connected to device provisioning service. All right, I am back on. Network's good. Okay. Better, lightning fast. All right, so I'm gonna go back before we jump into that simulated device and how to create one. Let's go to certificates. You can see that you can upload your certificate here. So I already did my my root certificate, added it, and you can do the same as well. Again, make sure that you verify that certificate, because if you don't, it's actually not going to work. You need to actually verify that that is the certificate and proof of possession of that certificate. So have already done that. I have proven that the certificate is correct, it's verified, it's good to go, and so I can move on to the rest of the building the IoT solution. All right, so let's go ahead, go into the code. Now for the scenario, I actually have 2 devices already set up for this IoT hub, and we're going to create a 3rd device. And before we jump into that, I want to show you something. As mentioned before, device provisioning service links to your IoT hub. You can see that we have the IoT hub workshop 01 is our linked IoT hub. And you can find that IoT hub by going to IoT hub, actually seeing it. And if you go there, I want to showcase that when you go to see your devices, you're going to see all of the devices here, but I have 2 devices at the moment, and these devices were configured and provisioned and went through DPS and added to IoT Hub. So we're going to add that 3rd device securely. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to go ahead and let's see, let's open a folder. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new project. And this project's all about creating a new simulated device and getting it connected to DPS. So I'm going to select that folder. And I'm going to do this in C#. And keep in mind, you can do this in many different languages. I'm just using C#. If you're looking for help on how to get started with other languages and working with our SDKs, we do have on GitHub, which are open source SDKs, Azure IoT SDKs, that you can go here and then look for the language that you prefer and the support there. So for example, the C# one, I just clicked on that link and it took me to different samples. So I'm also able to see, the provisioning support as well and how to get started there. So, and there's plenty of example codes, even this example code that was built, I built it off of the X509 sample. So it's all of the code is available for you, which is a great way to get started. All right, so let's go ahead and create a simulated device that we will connect to DPS. So I'm going to go ahead and just open up a new terminal. You can do that through hotkeys. You can do that many different ways, but you can also do it by going to terminal and opening it. Since we're using C#, oh, before we get there, just want to say make sure you have your extensions. If you're using C#, we do have a C# extension for VS Code. Also, if you're using C#, make sure you download .NET Core. This is really important to move forward. All right, so both of those are already installed. You can see that I've installed C# extension for VS Code. Good to go. Going back to my device 3 folder. So I'm going to go ahead and hit .NET new console. So really this command just creates a project.cs file in my folder along with, the different project files with the project file. So that's good to go. I'm going to do .NET restore. This command really just gives you app access to the required .NET packages. And the next step for us is we want to install the required libraries. So the libraries you're going to want to install is the Microsoft Azure Devices Client, the Microsoft Azure Devices Provisioning Client, and the Microsoft Azure Devices Provisioning Transport AMQP library. And the libraries that you install also depend on the protocols you are using as well. So I'm going to go ahead, install .NET add package. Azure.devices.client. Make sure everything looks good. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and install the provisioning client. And then going ahead and install an additional library required. So it should be all good to go there. And you're going to see required assets to build and debug are missing. Make sure you hit yes, because what's going to give you is your VS Code assets that you need. All right, so let's go ahead. Now that we have got our files all ready to go, we're going to delete what we have in our program file. And we're going to take example code, and we'll dig into this example code, but I'm going to go ahead and take from my other devices code. Just going to copy all of that over. And this is really just based on the example code that we have from on GitHub for samples. All right, so let's go ahead and dig into this. And I'm going to hit save. And there's a couple different things that you need to think about, and different parts of the code that is extremely important.
Hey, Pamela?
Yes.
This is Matt. When we had that connectivity problem, the captioning tool dropped. Could you refresh the screen, that browser screen, to start the captioning again?
I can.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. Thanks. Thanks, Matt. All right. Captioning is back on, so that looks good. All right, so main areas that you really need to look into. One is that global device endpoint. This is for DPS. Where you actually find this is when you're in the portal, go to your device provisioning service, and an overview, you're going to have the endpoint here. This is really important to add into your code. You're also going to need your ID scope. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. And put it into the code. And you can see it was already here, but just showing. The next thing is you will also want your leaf certificate file name. And so I already have a leaf certificate for this device. So I'm going to actually pull that up just so you can see what I'm talking about. So I have a root certificate, but I also have leaf certificates for each one of those devices. So I have one right here for a third device already to go. So all I did was just say where to find that actual leaf certificate. And then let's go ahead and dig a little bit into the code itself. So the provisioning device client really, this is a really important part of this example code. Provisioning is really achieved by calling this single call to the provisioning device client. The .register async API. This is going to specify the global endpoint, your ID scope. Remember, the ID scope is unique for each one of your provisioning service deployment, and also that was created right when we created the DPS. And then it's also going to have the security provider and the provisioning transport handler. So you can see that we've already put the global device point and the DPS ID scope already up here and is ready to go. But this is just calling this single call is the magic for provisioning with a device provisioning service. We're going to dig a little bit more. This part of the code is really just all about sending the device logic from these simulated sensors. So we're, measuring temperature, humidity, and also we have a fan on, fan off part of the code as well. But this is just making sure that this messaging is going to Azure IoT Hub. And then it's also, let me bring this out a little bit more. It's also it's the code, part of the code that gives updates to the device with changes to the device twin properties. So I'll give an example here. Keep going down. You can see that we have our device client authentication. You can also see it loads the device twin properties since the device is just starting up. We can start reading and sending device telemetry, and then we can close the device client. This also says read the desired twin properties. If you were in the last workshop, Desire properties as a part of IoT Hub. Device twin. Desire properties is used along with reported properties to synchronize device configuration or conditions. The solution backend can actually set the desired properties, and the device app can read them. The device app can also receive notification of changes in the desired properties. So just a refresher on what desired twin properties are. And then we should be coming up to reported twin properties. Reported properties, these are used along with the desired properties to synchronize device configuration and condition. So the device app can set the reported properties, and the solution backend can actually read and query them. And then the rest of the code is really the simulated telemetry and also actually sending that telemetry message. All right, now that we've digged into the code, let's go ahead and just run. And what's going to happen is a couple different things. And you can, let me bring this up more. So what's happening in the backend is that DPS is, it's validating the identity of the device by validating the registration ID and the key against the enrollment list entry using the X509 verification. The device provisioning service is registering the device with the IoT Hub, and it's populating the device desired state, twin state. Then the IoT Hub is returning the device ID information, DPS, and then DPS is returning the IoT Hub connection information to the device. And now you can see that we're actually sending telemetry up to the hub. So the device is completely connected to the hub, and we should be able to see this particular information and message when we go into the portal. So let's just check that everything's working. So here's our DPS. We know what our link hub is. If we want to go to our link hub, we can also go here. We know that this is our linked IoT Hub. So let's just check that everything is going great. You can see now that we now have a device called device 3 that is now already enabled. It's registered, it's provisioned, it's configured, and now it's in the IoT Hub. And so we can actually go to overview. And there's a couple different ways to get here too, but you can see if we look at our metrics that we're starting to get telemetry up. And one view I really like to showcase as well, you can add a metric. So let's dig into this. Here's your IoT Hub standard metrics, and you can change a different view of metrics, but I want to showcase connected devices. So you can see that now we have a connected device here. And if I was going to reconnect all of my other devices, which I can, you'll start to see this going up because we have 3 devices total. One is running right now, but if I was running the other one, I could actually see this go up. And I'm gonna actually just take this to max. All right, so this is a great way just to see the messages that are being sent, how many devices you have connected up. But that just shows that the device is actually connecting to the cloud and the messages are being sent to the cloud. But let's double check that we can send from the cloud to the device and do messaging that way. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to go back to my devices in my IoT Hub. I'm going to connect and click on the device 3, which is the device we just created. And I am going to look at the device twin. And keep in mind, every time you create a new IoT hub, you always get a device twin for it. And I want to go just do a quick check if everything is, if I can send back a message from the cloud to the device. So I think what we're going to do is going to do temperature, and I think I'm going to do my ideal temperature, which is 68 degrees. So let's go back here before I hit save. You can see that these are the messages being sent. We have telemetry all over the place with temperature and humidity, but I prefer it 68 degrees always. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save on the device twin. This is in desired properties. Let's take a look, and yes, so the reported twin property has shown, and so you can see that I got my ideal temperature. So I'm nice and warm. So feeling good. And so this is a great way to easily see that we just sent a message down. And that is device provisioning service. The next part that I really want to cover, first I'm going to stop this application. Stop this app. I just hit Control-C if you were wondering what I did to stop that from running. Next is all about deprovisioning devices. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go back to my device provisioning service, which is Workshop DPS. And there's a couple different things that you need to do if you are deprovisioning, and there's actually two big steps that you need to do. The first one, you need to actually just disenroll the device from your provisioning service. And this is really important to prevent future auto provisioning. And you can do this with your enrollments by going ahead, clicking here. I'm clicking on I'm in my manage enrollments. Here's the enrollment, group enrollment that we've been using that whole time. And there's a couple ways that you can do this. So if you can choose to just completely delete it, or you can actually just go into it and disable. And this will temporarily disable for you, but today we want to completely just get rid of it. So I'm going to go ahead, delete. Do I want to remove the enrollment? Yes, I do. So you would think that if you remove the enrollment, you're all done. But you're not. You need the second step, and that is the deregistering your device from your IoT hub. And this is super important if you're trying to prevent future communication and data transfer. So you need to be able to do that, because remember, DPS is really linking to your IoT hub and creating that connection. So I'm going to go back to the IoT hub that had all of these devices. And I'm going to go ahead and delete. So do I wish to delete these selected devices? Yes, I do. And it's now ready for you, and it's all good. And you have got rid of that connection with your devices. You've removed device provisioning service. And you can see that even though I removed that group enrollment, those devices are still in that IoT hub. So it's really important that you do both steps. All right, so that is the lab part of the device provisioning service. I'm going to go ahead and go to showcasing some of the developer resources to help you get started. That way you can have this fun after this class. All right, so we're going to go to this link, and it's aka.ms Securely Connect Devices Learning Path. And where this is going to take you is Microsoft Learn. Microsoft Learn has been around for the last probably a year and a half now, and it's all about sandbox environment learning. And so these are mini tutorials for you to go ahead and learn how to work with our services and get started. So this one is actually, this link takes you to a learning path, and a learning path is a collection of different modules to help you get up-ramped on all things Azure IoT. So this one is securely connect IoT devices to the cloud. And there is the automatically provision your IoT devices securely and at scale with the device provisioning service. And this one will deep dive a little bit more on X509 certificates and how it works. I know I went really high level on it, but just to give you the idea, and then also how to make one as well. And so we recommend that you check that out. Keep in mind, the online sandbox environment lasts for about 2 hours. So after 2 hours, you lose those resources. So you can also follow along this tutorial with your own Azure subscription too. And I really recommend that because you can do this with the free tier. And so it's nice to have those resources already in your resource group. All right, now let's go into resources on how you can get started. Now, if you're interested in upskilling on Azure IoT, thank you for viewing this video. I want to give you some other resources you can go to as well to continue your learning. One is that for device provisioning service, we have a hands-on learning module on Microsoft Learn that I really recommend you going to. You can find that off of aka.ms Learn IoT. And what's nice about Microsoft Learn is it is a sandbox environment, so you can learn about the ins and outs of device provisioning service into an IoT solution and go through a hands-on lab and not even have to have an Azure subscription. And if you already have an Azure subscription, that's great. You are able to use yours as well and the tutorial. Next, we invite you to watch and join our Microsoft IoT Developers channel on YouTube. This is just a great way for you to get latest announcements, deep dive trainings, and updates on community projects. We have all different types of videos, no matter where you are in your development journey and upskilling journey. Next, we'd love for you to join and discover and discuss in our IoT tech community. So you could check out our different blog posts. You can find announcements there, and it's a way to share your project and tutorials as well. So it's just a great way to meet other community members. The last thing is, if you're ready to get started building and you need technical questions answered, you could go to Microsoft Q&A. We do have an Azure IoT. It is a supported product and Azure Q&A. If you love Stack Overflow like all of us do, we do monitor Stack Overflow and try to answer your questions there, but we also answer on Microsoft Q&A. So it's just a way for you to get directly to myself and others from the product team to help answer your questions. And if you're interested and you're taking that AZ220 exam, which is all about the Microsoft certification for Azure IoT Developer Specialty, you can go to this Cloud Skills Challenge. This is part of the Cloud Skills Challenge. This is all about 4 weeks, 30 days of learning to upskill for that certification. After you've done the 4 weeks, you can also get a nice voucher that's about 50% off your exam before you take it. So I want to just thank you for attending this session. And here's a set of links from the presentation all in one page for you. You can find it in the description as well. So I want to thank you again. And we have a full 6-part series on building IoT solutions. So I hope that you will continue on to the hands-on lab and then continue on learning.